"She was never really your grandchild," my daughter whispered. The church was still. The hymn faltered mid-note. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see her face. Claire's eyes were dry, her voice quiet enough for only me. I felt the room tilt. My breath caught, and every glance in the pews turned into suspicion I could almost feel pressing against my back. I am Evelyn, 62, and this was the day I buried the child who had filled the silence of my house. For 6 years, I believed love was inheritance enough. The morning light still played through the stained glass windows, warm against my hands clasped on my lap. I thought of coffee cups left half full, her drawings taped on the refrigerator, the smell of pancake syrup on Sunday mornings. That was our world. Simple, ordinary, safe. The organ hummed again, but softer. People pretended not to notice the small war unfolding beside the coffin. I studied the silver locket at my neck, the one with her picture inside. It felt heavier than it ever had before. Claire folded her arms, chin slightly lifted. Not grief, but something closer to triumph. The warmth drained out of the room. After the service, I stood near the casket as people passed, murmuring condolences that slid right past me. The air was full of lilies and polite words. Claire avoided my eyes. I smiled at her the way a stranger might, brief, polite, meaningless. When the last mourner left, I leaned close to the casket and whispered a promise that sounded more like a warning. Back home, the quiet felt wrong. The house smelled of dust and flowers from the service. I placed the locket on the table and watched the light catch its edge. That shimmer reminded me of mornings when she'd tug at my sleeve and ask for just one more story. I sat at the kitchen table and let the memories play in loops. Her laughter, her tiny hand gripping mine, her questions about angels. Every image carried weight, pressing against the truth Claire had thrown like a match. It was almost evening when I realized I hadn't spoken since the church. The clock on the wall ticked past 6. The sound was sharp, steady, too loud for the small room. I made tea I didn't drink and stared through the window as the sun lowered behind the fence. The cup cooled untouched. Somewhere outside, a car door shut. For a second, I thought she'd come back to explain, but the driveway stayed empty. I replayed her whisper again and again until the words stopped sounding human. "She was never really your grandchild." Each repetition stripped away tone until only meaning remained. If it was true, then Claire had lied for years. If it wasn't, she'd spoken that lie on purpose, to hurt me in front of death itself. When night settled, I went to the bedroom and opened the old drawer where I kept letters from the past. There were hospital bills, a few bank receipts, and a faded photo of Claire holding the baby at the hospital. Her smile then was real. I traced it with my thumb, feeling both love and betrayal under the same skin. My thoughts turned to the trust fund my late husband left, the one meant for the next generation. Claire managed it after he passed. $500,000 locked away, untouched, or so I believed. If her whisper was part of something larger, that money might already be gone. The thought tightened my chest. I went to bed without praying. The house creaked around me like it was listening. Somewhere in the dark, I decided on one thing. I would not confront her yet. She wanted a reaction, wanted me to break. Silence would unsettle her more than anger ever could. The next morning at 8, sunlight hit the photograph of the child on the mantel. The colors seemed different, paler. I touched the frame, and for the first time, I felt unsure whose face I was touching. Grief and doubt make strange companions. They sit beside you, whispering opposite truths, until one becomes unbearable. By mid-morning, I had folded the black dress, cleaned the kitchen, and put away every flower from the funeral. The world moved on quickly. I carried the locket to the bedroom, opened it, and whispered to the picture, "If you were mine, that's all that ever mattered." Then I closed it, slow, deliberate, the sound of metal sealing memory. Claire's words would wait. They would rot in silence until she realized silence could fight back. For now, I had planning to do, quiet, careful, invisible. I won't ask her again. Not yet. You're not listed anywhere, the lawyer said softly. The words slid across the polished desk and landed like cold water. The office smelled of old paper and faint coffee. Claire sat beside me, her heels crossed neatly, her hands folded in practiced calm. She didn't look at me. I watched the lawyer's mouth move, each phrase smaller than the one before. I signed the first version of this will 20 years ago, after my husband's death. Back then, the trust fund was supposed to secure our family. $500,000 set aside for our line, for the house, for education, for the grandchild I thought I had. Today, my name wasn't anywhere. Not as guardian, not as beneficiary, not even as witness. I felt my throat tighten. The lawyer kept clearing his throat, pretending it was about formality, not theft. Claire leaned closer. Mom, it's just legal cleanup. Nothing personal. Of course, I said quietly. Nothing ever is. Her smile carried a trace of pity and a touch of warning. I glanced at the pen she'd used earlier, the same one that had signed her power of attorney. Its silver body caught the light as if proud of itself. The lawyer slid a sealed envelope toward her and pushed a duplicate toward me, a copy for records only. I took it. The paper was smooth, but it trembled slightly in my hands. He explained that the estate was being reorganized to simplify future management. Simplify, he said, like trimming a dead branch. But this branch was me. I looked at Claire's reflection in the glass cabinet. Calm, composed, rehearsed. I'd seen that expression before, the night she convinced me to let her handle the accounts after her father's passing. You don't need to worry, she'd said then. You've done enough, Mom. I believed her. That faith now felt expensive. The warmth that had filled our kitchen each morning seemed far away. We used to eat toast and scrambled eggs by the window while she scrolled through emails. I'd pour coffee. She'd promised she'd sort things out soon. We laughed about small debts, the new refrigerator payment, the leaking roof, family breakfasts fading one bill at a time. I thought those mornings meant partnership. They were, it seems, rehearsals for my removal. When the lawyer left to make copies, Claire leaned back and crossed her arms. You're not upset, right? I'm just surprised. You know how these things are. You never cared about money. I looked at her and smiled faintly. I do now. She laughed once, short and sharp, as if she'd caught a joke I wasn't part of. Then her phone buzzed, and she slipped into a whispering tone, eyes flicking to the door. I didn't need to hear every word. I'd learned to read silence long ago. She finished the call and stood. We're done here, she said, grabbing her envelope. I'll handle everything from now on. I nodded. I'm sure you will. At noon, the sun burned through the office blinds. The heat pressed against the window pane, streaking the dust in thin lines. The lawyer returned with my copy, said something about updated records and legal accuracy. I thanked him. Then I pressed my thumb against the embossed seal. It left a faint mark, a small bruise of truth. As we left, Claire linked her arm through mine. Lunch? Another time, I said. I'm not hungry. She shrugged and walked ahead, her heels clicking like a countdown. Outside, the air smelled like rain. The sealed envelope felt heavy, almost alive. Inside it was the proof that I'd been erased. Politely, officially, permanently. At home, I placed it beside my late husband's photo. The frame leaned slightly, same as always. I whispered to him, "You'd have seen this coming, wouldn't you?" The room didn't answer, but I could almost feel his silence agreeing. That evening, as the clock struck 7, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope. I traced every clause, every line. There were 2 different inks, one from years ago, mine, one fresh, dark, and angled, hers. The forgery wasn't clumsy. It was perfect. But perfection is still proof. Claire believed I'd crumble under formality, that a missing name meant defeat. But ink lies easier than people do, and paper remembers. I folded the will back into its envelope, pressed it flat, and tucked it beneath the stack of old bank receipts I'd saved since my husband's passing. He used to tell me every dollar leaves a trail if you know where to look. Tonight, I understood what he meant. If she rewrote history, I'll rewrite the ending. "We have no record of your account, ma'am." The teller's voice was polite, almost kind, but it carried that flat tone banks use when they're denying something simple. I slid my ID across the counter again, slower this time, the edge brushing against the glass. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, hesitant. The screen in front of her stayed blank. She frowned, tapped again, then looked at me with the same pity you give a confused old woman who's lost her way. I wasn't lost. I knew exactly what I was asking for. The account my husband and I opened together 30 years ago. The same one where my pension landed each month. The same one Claire promised to help manage after the funeral. "Could you check again?" I asked. "I've checked 3 times," she said, her smile tightening. "There's nothing here under your name." The air inside the branch was too cold. The hum of machines, the low conversations, the quiet clicking of pens. Everything felt rehearsed. I pressed my palm against the counter. The glass was cold and smooth, the kind that doesn't care who's on which side. Behind me, people shifted in line. Someone sighed loudly. The teller leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Do you maybe have a joint holder? A family member who—" "My daughter," I said. "Claire." Her eyes softened. "Then it's possible she moved the funds. You'll need to speak with her." I nodded, even smiled. But inside, something broke. My pension, my savings, every trace of me on paper, gone. Outside, the air hit warmer. I stood on the sidewalk, holding the useless debit card between my fingers. The sun was too bright for early afternoon. A retired clerk I'd known from years ago, Mabel, was walking out of the same bank. She stopped when she saw me. "Evelyn?" "Yes." She looked over her shoulder, then spoke low. "I remember you and your husband. You still live on Cedar Street?" I nodded. She hesitated, then whispered, "Your daughter filed an update last year, a second signature after his death. That gave her full access." I stared at her, trying to keep my voice steady. "You saw it?" She nodded once. "It's not supposed to happen without consent. But it did." The street noise grew louder. Car horns, footsteps, life moving on. I thanked her quietly and pulled a $20 bill from my wallet, pressing it into her hand. "Please, get yourself lunch." She tried to refuse, but I closed her fingers over the bill. "For honesty," I said. On the walk home, every shop window reflected something hollow. My reflection looked smaller than I remembered. When I reached my gate, I realized I didn't have the energy to open it. I leaned against the post and closed my eyes. By evening, I'd made tea I didn't drink. The house felt larger now, each room holding a different silence. I opened the drawer in my husband's old desk and pulled out a tin box from the back, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were receipts, letters, and an old ledger from when we still wrote every expense down by hand. Rent, groceries, hospital bills, the cost of her college tuition. It all lived there, in faded ink. I spent the next hour writing dates, names, and every account I could remember. My hand shook halfway through, but I kept going. At exactly 8:30, the clock on the wall struck, loud and rhythmic, as if reminding me how time never stops counting, even when banks do. Claire had erased me from paper, but not from memory. That's what she didn't understand. I still had every document from the years before she took over. The old statements, the deposit slips, the proof of who built that account. I spread them out across the table, the paper edges curling slightly under the lamp. One slip caught my eye. A deposit from 12 years ago, signed by my husband's hand. His writing was neat, careful, the kind that meant something. I traced it with my finger, feeling its steadiness steady me in return. Tomorrow, I'd call the finance office downtown, the one that still keeps manual archives. They'd tell me how to request older copies. I'd find every missing number, every signature. I'd build my trail quietly, line by line. When the phone rang that night, I didn't pick up. I knew it was her. She'd feel it already, that something had shifted. I looked at the old debit card on the table and smiled, not with sadness, but with recognition. Power changes shape, but it doesn't vanish. Her hands touched my money. Now they'll feel its weight. "She brings a man here when you're gone," my neighbor murmured. The words landed like an old wound reopening. I stood on the porch, gripping the railing. Behind her polite tone, I could hear the thrill of being the first to tell me. I thanked her, smiled faintly, and walked back toward the house. The garden fence between us felt higher than ever. At dusk, I went outside again. The air was cool, heavy with cigarette smoke drifting from somewhere close. That smell hadn't belonged here before. I followed it along the fence line until I saw faint footprints near the gate. Not mine, not Claire's. A car had been parked outside, close enough to crush the grass. Later that night, the flash came, quick and white, cutting across the yard like lightning. I froze. A camera, somewhere in the dark. Then silence. Only the quiet ticking of the wind chime. Waited, heart pounding, until the light disappeared. The next morning, an envelope slid under my door. No note, no name. Inside was a photo. Claire stood near the old house I'd helped her buy, the lawyer beside her. His hand rested on her arm, both smiling, faces turned slightly away from the camera. I didn't remember breathing for several seconds. The photo smelled faintly of smoke, as if whoever printed it had done so in haste. I held it up to the window. Their closeness wasn't accidental. She hadn't met him for grief counseling or legal updates like she'd said weeks ago. They were allies, and maybe more. I sat at the table, tracing the edges of the picture until my fingers blackened with ash. "So, this is what partnership looks like," I whispered. My mind went back to the day she moved into that house, how she hugged me at the doorway and said, "It's all because of you, Mom." I believed her. I even helped pick the curtains. I spent the afternoon in silence, flipping through old photos of better days. Claire in her graduation robe, her father's arm around her shoulders, my own smile full of trust. We had built everything together, savings, property, a name that meant something. And now she'd taken all of it, brick by brick, truth by truth. At 4 p.m., I made tea and sat by the window. I told myself I wouldn't cry. Grief was useless now. Anger, though, that had purpose. The boundary between us had vanished the moment she'd rewritten the will. But this was different. This was her unmasking herself. That night, I took a lighter from the kitchen drawer and went outside. The wind smelled like rain and smoke again. A perfect mix for endings. I tore the photo's edges, burned them piece by piece, watching the paper curl and blacken. I stopped before the faces were gone, leaving only the middle intact. I needed to remember. I slid what remained into a drawer with the will copy, the receipts, and my husband's letters. The drawer shut with a soft click, the sound of a decision sealing itself. I would no longer act like her mother. When Claire called later, her tone was sweet. "Just checking in. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I said. "Busy, actually." "Doing what?" she asked, laughing. "Cleaning up the past," I replied. She paused. "Well, don't overthink things, Mom. Life's short." "Yes," I said, "but consequences last longer." Her silence stretched, uneasy. Then she changed the subject, told me about a dinner she had that night. I knew who it was with. After the call, I sat in the dim living room, staring at the faint burn mark on my desk where the photo had rested. The clock struck 9. Time had started keeping score again. I thought about how long betrayal must take to plan, how much patience it needs to bloom into something this cruel, and I realized she'd been tending it for years, waiting for me to weaken, to trust her one last time. But I wasn't weak. I was awake now. I stopped being her mother that night. "You'll need to move out, Mom." Her voice came from the doorway, even, practiced, legal. Not a daughter speaking to her mother, but a landlord speaking to a tenant. I stood still, the evening light from the hallway cutting across the floor. She held a folded letter, official in its precision. I almost smiled. "You're serious?" "It's just procedure," she said. "The property's under my name now. It's easier if I disappear." Her jaw tightened. "Don't make this harder." The knock that followed a few hours later was softer, professional. A council officer stood outside, holding a clipboard. Behind him, the brass plate on the door reflected the orange streetlight. He introduced himself gently, explained that he was there to deliver notice. His tone was kind enough to sting worse. I took the letter. The sound of paper sliding free echoed faintly through the hall. The ink was dark, the phrasing colder than any argument we'd ever had. Vacate within 10 days. I read it twice, tracing the official seal with my thumb. The officer hesitated. "Do you have somewhere to go?" I nodded once. "I'll manage." When he left, I sat at the dining table, the same place we used to eat Sunday pancakes. The brass key to the front door lay in my palm, heavier than it should have been. I turned it slowly, feeling the ridges press into my skin. That key had once symbolized safety. Now it was a deadline. At 9 that night, I walked through each room. The air felt different, stripped of ownership. The sound of my own footsteps seemed louder than usual. I looked at the photographs on the wall, birthdays, graduations, vacations that had cost more than we could afford. Every frame whispered that money had built this home, and greed had stolen it. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed softly. I thought about the day I helped her buy it, how she promised to pay me back after sorting the mortgage. That was the start, though I hadn't known it then. By morning, I was ready. The sun broke through the curtains, faint but steady. I brewed coffee and sat with the eviction notice beside my cup. The words didn't scare me anymore. They clarified things. She wanted control, not distance. Taking my space was her way of proving she could erase me from the story she was rewriting. Before noon, I called the council office. The same officer picked up. "You don't need to come back," I said. "I've signed the acknowledgement." He sighed in relief. "I'm sorry this happened." "Don't be," I told him. "Some losses teach you where to build again." That afternoon, I withdrew the last of my emergency cash, just over $4,000. I rented a small apartment downtown, 3 months paid in advance, all in cash, so Claire couldn't trace it. The place was quiet, bare walls and one window overlooking the street. Freedom never looked so empty, or so clean. I sat on the floor, unpacking one box at a time. Old receipts, my husband's watch, the burned photo I'd kept, the will copy, the locket. Every item proof that memory outlasts possession. I stacked the documents neatly inside a drawer, the envelope from the eviction notice resting on top like a label. Around 6, the phone rang. Her name flashed across the screen. I let it ring out once, twice, then answered. "Did you get the papers?" she asked. "I did." "I hope you understand. It's not personal." "It never is, Claire. Only expensive." She hesitated. "You'll be fine. You always land on your feet." "I don't fall anymore," I said. "You made sure of that." There was silence, then the soft click of her hanging up. I stared at the phone a long time. The brass key still sat on the table beside it. I picked it up, turned it in my hand, and slipped it into my purse. That night, the apartment smelled faintly of paint and rain. I lay on the small bed, the city noise outside rising and falling like a tide. Somewhere between exhaustion and defiance, I realized she'd given me exactly what I needed. Separation. No more boundaries blurred by guilt. Loss had turned into space, and space into strategy. She took my house, but not my story. "You shouldn't have kept these," the clerk warned. Her voice shook as she handed me the old file folder. The office around us smelled faintly of dust and cleaning solution. Papers rustled like secrets waking up after too long. "I shouldn't," I said. "But you did." She nodded quickly. "They destroy records older than 5 years. I wasn't supposed to hold on to these, but something felt wrong when they sent that notice." I opened the folder on her desk. The pages inside were neatly clipped together. Withdrawal slips, dated months after my husband's death. My name appeared at the bottom of each one, the signature steady, confident. Too confident. "That's not your handwriting," she whispered. "No," I said. "It's hers." I pulled the lamp closer. The reading light cast a circle over the paper, and the ink glistened faintly under it. The strokes were familiar. The same exaggerated loop in every Y, the same firm line crossing the T. Claire had copied me perfectly, almost lovingly. I ran my fingers over the page, feeling the faint ridges of pressure where the pen had pressed into the paper. Proof felt colder than betrayal. It didn't argue, didn't scream. It just existed, undeniable. "How much did she take?" I asked. The clerk swallowed. "Almost everything in the joint savings. Transfers made quarterly. The last one was for $50,000. I nodded, not surprised. The pattern fit. Every few months, another small withdrawal. Careful enough to avoid notice, slow enough to look routine. Greed rarely moves fast. She hesitated, then said, "You could report this, but she's family. These things, they get messy." I looked at her, steady. "They're already messy." I gathered the pages one by one, laying them flat again. The paper felt fragile, but dangerous, like it might cut through skin if I held it too tightly. "I'll take photographs," I said. She bit her lip. "If anyone finds out I gave you these—" "No one will," I interrupted. "You did the right thing." She exhaled slowly, relief flickering across her face. "You always came in with your husband," she said softly. "He liked things neat, every line balanced." I smiled faintly. He did. As I left the building, the afternoon light was fading. The city noise felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's world. I clutched the folder to my chest, crossing the street carefully, the documents heavier than they looked. Back in my apartment, I cleared the small table under the window. The lamp's glow spread across the wood. I placed the folder there, opened it, and began photographing each page. Click. Another lie captured in truth. The ink shimmered faintly again under the light. I zoomed in, studying each signature. She hadn't even changed the pen. Same brand, same dark blue. Consistency was her downfall. The truth fit perfectly, like her signature always did. I stacked the photos in a separate folder on my phone, locked with a passcode she didn't know. Then I slid the originals into a brown envelope and sealed it with tape. The sound of it ripping and sticking filled the quiet room. Silence has a way of making everything louder. The refrigerator's hum, the faint tick of the wall clock, the sound of paper against paper as I shifted the folder. I didn't mind it now. Silence was armor. By 9, the room glowed softly from the lamp, the folder still on the table like a small bonfire of proof. I looked at it and realized this wasn't just evidence. It was recovery. Every line of ink was a step back toward what she'd tried to erase. Tomorrow I'd visit the family attorney, not to beg for fairness. That word died months ago. But to warn her, to let her know I was coming with everything she thought she'd hidden. The truth didn't shout. It waited. And now it was in my hands. The truth fits perfectly. Like her signature. "You'll come for dinner, right? Just us?" Her voice was soft, almost playful. It had been weeks since she'd sounded like that. I paused before answering. "Just us?" "Yes," she said. "No lawyers, no talk about the estate, just dinner. I think we both need a reset." The word reset lingered in my mind long after. The call ended. I agreed anyway. Some traps are worth walking into when you already know the floorboards. By the time I reached the restaurant, the sky outside had turned a deep blue. Candles flickered on each table. A small pendant around my neck felt heavier than usual. The recorder inside my purse blinked faintly, its red light hidden under the flap. She stood up when she saw me, smiling like nothing had ever happened. "You look lovely," she said. "So do you," I replied, sitting across from her. The waiter poured the wine. It smelled sharp, almost metallic. I took a sip, slow and careful. For the first few minutes, it felt almost real. She asked about my apartment, about how I was settling in. I gave short answers, steady ones. Her eyes searched for cracks that weren't there. Then she started weaving words like silk, talk of forgiveness, family, rebuilding what was broken by misunderstandings. She laughed lightly, brushing her hair back, rehearsed to perfection. I let her talk. Every sentence was a performance, and I was the only audience that mattered. At one point, she leaned forward. "You know, Mom, I've been thinking about what Dad wanted. He wanted us to work together, not fight over accounts and titles." I tilted my glass. "He also wanted honesty." She smiled, unshaken. "Of course. That's why I'm suggesting we close the old trust and simplify things. The transfers have been delayed for months. No one needs that stress." The word transfers caught my attention like a spark in dry wood. She hadn't realized she'd said too much. I nodded, pretending not to notice. "That makes sense," I said. "You always handle these things better." "Thank you," she replied, and for a moment her tone softened. "I know you've been through a lot. Maybe this dinner can be a turning point." "It already is," I said quietly. Her hand brushed the stem of her wine glass. "Then let's not ruin it. No more secrets." "No more," I agreed, raising my glass. The rim touched my lip. The taste of the wine was faintly metallic again, heavy on the tongue. We talked for another hour, or rather she talked, about her plans, her frustrations, her growing impatience with the paperwork delays. Each word pressed deeper into its own contradiction. By dessert, I didn't need to push further. She'd already revealed everything I came for. When she excused herself to take a call, I reached into my purse and switched off the recorder. The blinking red light disappeared. The last thing it captured was her voice complaining about the trust account and those transfers getting stuck again. I sat back, listening to the low hum of the restaurant. Laughter from nearby tables, forks tapping plates, a waiter refilling glasses. Everything ordinary except for the quiet satisfaction building inside me. When she returned, she looked lighter, as if she believed the evening had worked. "It feels good to talk like this," she said. "It does," I replied. "Closure always does." She smiled, relieved, the kind of smile that only comes from believing you've won. After she left, I stayed for a while, tracing the rim of my glass. The pendant around my neck caught the faint restaurant light. I felt calm. No victory, no bitterness, just confirmation. Later that night, back in my apartment, I poured myself water and set my phone beside the lamp. The recording played clearly. Her voice, word for word. "The transfers have been delayed for months." Each sentence sounded smaller than it had in person. Every laugh, every pause, every slip. It all turned into evidence. I sent a copy to the same clerk who'd helped me recover the bank records. She understood immediately. "This is more than enough," she whispered. I didn't celebrate. I just sat still, letting the silence fold around me. Forgiveness had been the bait. Family had been the disguise. She poured herself into a trap of her own making. "You think I don't know what you're doing?" The voice cut through the dark like a knife. It was past midnight. The phone on the nightstand kept ringing, steady and cruel, until I answered. Her tone was low, calm, dangerous. "You've gone too far," she said. "This will end badly for you." I stared at the ceiling, heartbeat matching the rhythm of her threats. "Then stop calling me," I said quietly. "Oh, I'm not the one chasing ghosts," she replied, and hung up. The silence afterward was louder than the call itself. The apartment around me felt smaller, the air heavier. I looked at the phone. Missed call, unknown number, but I knew it was her. The repetition of it had become familiar. I swung my legs off the bed, turned on the small lamp, and watched the clock tick past 12:30. My throat was dry. The sound of the city outside was faint. A car passing, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. The phone buzzed again once, twice, and stopped. I didn't pick up. Fear had already burned itself out months ago. What replaced it was calculation. Every threat she made built my archive. Every slip of her control made the truth easier to prove. I opened my laptop and dialed a friend at the phone company. He worked late shifts. I knew he'd answer. "It's her again?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Unknown number, same tone. Can you trace it?" He sighed. "Send me the timestamp. I'll log it quietly." "Thank you." "Just promise me you'll be careful," he said. "These kinds of calls can escalate fast." "They already have," I replied, "but not in her favor." While he traced the call, I stood by the window. The street lamp outside flickered, its light stuttering across the empty sidewalk. I pulled the curtain shut, but a small gap remained, enough to see the glow of the lamplight breaking across the glass. For a long moment, I just listened. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the faint pulse of electricity in the walls. Everything ordinary felt amplified. That's how intimidation works. It makes the normal world feel haunted. At 1 a.m, my phone vibrated again. A text this time. "You don't understand who you're dealing with." I didn't reply. I saved the message and forwarded it to my friend. He responded within minutes. "Same network, same location as last time. I've logged it." Proof. Quiet, undeniable, steady proof. I wrote the time down in my notebook. Another entry in the growing list. Each call, each text, each veiled threat had its own line, its own record. Her attempts to frighten me were turning into documentation. I thought about how much power she'd once had, how easily she could bend people with charm or guilt. Now, all she had were phone calls, desperate, late, anonymous. Control was slipping from her fingers, and she could feel it. The phone rang one last time. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then I let it stop. I whispered into the quiet room, "Every sound you make becomes evidence." Outside, the flickering streetlight finally steadied. I watched its glow through the narrow slit in the curtain. My fear was gone, replaced by a strange calm, the kind that comes when the tables start to turn. By 2, I received a final message from my friend. "Call traced. Number archived. You're covered." I exhaled slowly, closed the curtain fully, and set the phone down on the table. The device sat there, harmless now, reflecting a faint ring of light from the lamp. I climbed back into bed, but sleep didn't come. Instead, I replayed the sound of her voice in my mind, the edge, the effort, the weakness hiding underneath. She thought she could scare me into silence, but every word she spoke only confirmed what I already knew. She was unraveling. "Let her call again. I'm recording everything." "People should know what she did," the journalist said. Her tone was steady, but her eyes carried a kind of hunger, the kind that comes from chasing truth long enough to smell when it's near. We met in a quiet cafe near downtown. The place smelled faintly of roasted beans and old wood. I kept my folder closed on the table between us. "You said you've heard whispers," I said. She nodded. "Trust fund irregularities, transfers under a family name. I don't print rumors. I verify them." I hesitated before answering. "Then you already know more than most." She waited. Silence stretched, comfortable for her, tense for me. I opened the folder just enough to show a few pages. Bank slips, letters, redacted, but real. "No signatures," I said. "You'll get copies, not originals." "That's fair," she replied, pulling out her pen recorder. "I just need clarity, not ownership." Her calmness made it easier to breathe. I leaned back and spoke carefully. Dates, patterns, what the withdrawals looked like, how long they'd gone unnoticed. She took notes fast, pausing only once to ask, "Do you want your name mentioned?" "No," I said firmly. "Let the truth stand on its own." She smiled faintly. "That's the best kind of truth, the kind that doesn't beg to be believed." When I left the cafe, the sun was already low. The reflection of glass buildings shimmered on the street, and I caught my own face in one of them. Older, thinner, but calm. I'd handed over enough to start a storm, not enough to drown in it. A week passed. Tuesday morning, around 8, my phone buzzed again and again. Messages from neighbors, a missed call from the same journalist, and then a link she'd sent. I clicked it. There it was, a bold headline spread across the digital page: "Widow battles silent theft." The article was sharp and measured. No names, no direct accusations, but every paragraph traced the shape of my story. Anyone who knew us would understand who the unnamed daughter-in-law was. The reporter had done her job beautifully, the truth, without the blood. I scrolled through it slowly, noticing how she'd quoted my lines without twisting them. The numbers, the quiet theft, the emotional cost. Beneath the headline sat an image of folded papers and a pen beside a cup of untouched coffee. My details, my proof, reimagined into something public. At 10 that morning, Claire called. I let it ring once before answering. "How dare you?" she snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I didn't write it," I said. "You fed it," she hissed. "You let them smear my name." "It doesn't mention your name," I said evenly. "Funny how you recognized yourself." For a moment there was only silence. Then she said, "This isn't over." "It never is," I replied, and ended the call. I sat at my kitchen table, the newspaper folded beside the lamp. The printed version arrived an hour later, thick ink, faintly smudged headline. I traced the bold letters with my fingertip. Proof had moved from private folders to public eyes. Outside, a delivery man stacked papers on a nearby porch. The faint sound of rustling pages carried through the open window. For the first time in months, I felt something close to relief. Attention was no longer my enemy. It was my witness. Later that evening, the journalist called again. "It's spreading," she said. "People are talking, local radio picked it up, no one's named, but it's clear enough." "Good," I said softly. "That's all it needed to be." "Do you regret it?" she asked. "No," I said. "Truth doesn't ruin people. It only reveals them." She exhaled on the line, thoughtful. "Then you've already won." After the call, I placed the folded paper back on the table beside my old pen, the same one I'd used to sign everything that gave her power in the first place. Now, both sat there, silent symbols of reversal. Through the window, the sky dimmed into evening. Streetlights blinked on one by one, glowing like small acts of recognition. I looked at the bold headline one more time and smiled faintly. Tomorrow, everyone will read her name between the lines. "You've been served." The man at the door said it like it was routine. A white envelope in his hand, my name typed neatly across the front. I took it without a word. The paper was thick, heavier than I expected. Inside was her answer, a lawsuit for defamation. I sat down at the kitchen table, unfolded the pages, and read every line. Each word was sharp, formal, meant to intimidate. She wanted silence through the law now, not satisfaction, control. By morning, I called the legal aid office. A woman named Ellen answered. Her voice was brisk but kind. "Bring everything you have," she said. "We'll look at it together." 2 days later, I walked into the courthouse. The air inside was colder than the street outside. The marble floors echoed every step. I clutched my file box tight, copies of statements, the recorded transcript, the journalist's article, proof wrapped in paper. Ellen met me near the security line. She was younger than I expected, mid-30s maybe, glasses slightly crooked. "You'll be fine," she said. "Truth has a way of surviving." We took our seats. Claire sat across the aisle, flanked by her attorney. She didn't look at me at first. When she finally did, her expression was blank, almost rehearsed. The clerk announced the case. The words, "Claire versus Richardson," echoed through the room. I'd stopped using my married name years ago, but the court hadn't caught up. Her lawyer started with the usual performance: damage to reputation, emotional distress, financial harm. He spoke fast, filling silence with accusation. I listened, steady. Then Ellen stood. "Your Honor," she said, "will address each claim with evidence already reviewed by this court's preliminary officer." She opened the box. "These are the bank withdrawal slips, verified as forged." The judge adjusted his glasses. "You have handwriting comparison?" "Yes," Ellen replied, sliding forward the document I'd kept for months. Expert review confirms mismatched samples. The supposed author was hospitalized during one of the recorded withdrawal dates. Claire's lawyer hesitated, flipping through his own binder. His voice dropped. We, haven't reviewed those yet, Ellen continued. Additionally, this audio recording captures the plaintiff referencing the trust account and transfer delays. She was recorded at a public restaurant, aware of being in a shared space. She pressed play. Claire's voice filled the courtroom, calm, confident, self-assured, until the exact moment she slipped. The transfers have been delayed for months. The silence afterward was immediate. Her lawyer shifted in his seat. The judge leaned back. I see, he said quietly. For the first time in months, the balance shifted. I didn't feel triumph, just gravity. Every word I'd collected now breathed in official air. The judge spoke again. I'm ordering an independent review of the trust account and its management. Until then, this defamation claim is suspended pending verification. Claire's attorney started to object, but the judge cut him off. Counsel, your client's own voice establishes relevance. We'll let evidence lead. Ellen glanced at me and whispered, That's the turn. Claire sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, knuckles pale. She didn't look at me again. Afterward, we stepped outside. The courthouse steps gleamed under a thin winter sun. I gripped the cold metal railing, steadying myself. The chill grounded me more than anything else had in weeks. Ellen spoke softly. This isn't the end, but it's a beginning. She can't rewrite what's on record. I nodded. No, she can't. Below us, people passed by, law clerks, parents, a man carrying a file box just like mine. Ordinary lives, each with their own battles. I thought about how far the story had traveled, from whispered threats to forged slips, from midnight calls to printed pages, and now to a courtroom where truth finally had a microphone. When Ellen left, I stayed a moment longer. The steps beneath my feet felt heavier, but the weight was clean. Not punishment, proof. As I turned to leave, I looked down at the envelope folded in my coat pocket. The stamp at the bottom of the summons caught the light. She can't unsign what's already stamped. Every transfer will be reviewed, the auditor said. He didn't look up while speaking, just flipped another page, his pen marking a quiet rhythm against the table. The conference room was too bright, walls covered in muted charts and framed ethics pledges. I sat across from him, hands folded, a sealed file resting near my elbow. For months, I'd lived in the fog of suspicion. Now, the paper in front of him was turning it into fact. The audit wasn't just numbers, it was confession in ink. He cleared his throat. We've traced all withdrawals over the last 3 years. Several approvals don't match the original signatures. How much? I asked. He adjusted his glasses. $500,000, give or take. The words landed like iron. $500,000 stolen in plain daylight. My chest tightened, not from surprise, but from the confirmation that I'd been right all along. I remembered how she'd mocked me when I first asked about the trust. You wouldn't understand finances, she'd said, her tone dripping with pity. It's complicated. It wasn't complicated. It was theft dressed in family language. The auditor handed me a printed summary. Rows of highlighted figures lined the page, amounts, dates, initials. Claire's name repeated like a drumbeat. He pointed at one column. Here, see this pattern? She transferred funds into a secondary account every few months. Same routing path, slightly altered notation. It's classic internal diversion. I looked at the paper. The ink caught the overhead light, black and clean, no room for doubt. He leaned back. The court will receive this report within 48 hours. Once confirmed, her accounts will be frozen pending restitution. I nodded. So this ends it? Legally, yes, he said. But socially, these things echo. He wasn't wrong. Truth doesn't heal overnight. It reverberates through rooms, whispers across phones, alters how people stand near each other. When the meeting ended, I thanked him. He slid the sealed file toward me. "Keep this copy," he said. "You earned it." Outside, the afternoon light was sharp, almost white. The courthouse steps glowed faintly, still cold from morning shade. I opened the file once more, scanning the summary line. Total misappropriated funds, $500,000. The numbers stared back, bold and absolute. For a long moment, I didn't move. I thought about every bill I'd paid for my pension, every check she'd smiled through. I'd begged for clarity while she counted my savings. I walked toward the parking lot, each step lighter than the last. It wasn't joy. It was release. Justice doesn't sing. It exhales. A man passing by glanced at the file in my hand. "Audit day?" he asked, half joking. I smiled faintly. Something like that. When I reached my car, I placed the file on the passenger seat. The cover felt heavier than it should, as if truth carried physical mass. Inside, the highlighted numbers still glowed in my mind. Claire would receive her notice soon. The same system she'd mocked for being slow was now her judge. The trust she'd drained would be locked, her cards disabled, her accounts under review. I didn't plan to call her. Silence was more eloquent than confrontation. The world she built on stolen security was collapsing, and the sound of its fall didn't need an audience. I thought back to the first day I'd signed those papers, believing family meant safety. Now the word itself felt like an open window, something you close when it starts raining. The sun began to dip as I drove away. Traffic crawled, the city humming in its usual rhythm, unaware that one small corner of deceit had just been corrected. At the next red light, I rested my hand on the file. It was warm from the sun, the paper edges curled slightly. Proof had temperature, weight, and consequence. I whispered, more to myself than anyone, "She built her fortune on lies, and they just foreclosed." "Mom, I'm sorry." The words came through static, thin and trembling. For a second, I thought it was a wrong number. Then I recognized her breath, the sharp intake she always had before she lied. I didn't speak. I just let the silence fill the line. The old phone cord coiled around my wrist like a memory that wouldn't let go. Her voice cracked again. I didn't mean for it to go that far. The room was washed in the soft gold of late afternoon, the same kind of light that used to spill across the kitchen years ago when everything still felt normal. I could almost see her then, laughing at something trivial, pretending to be kind. Now, all I could hear was remorse. "I saw the papers," she whispered. "I know what the audit said. I know what I did." I stayed still. There was nothing left to explain. Guilt doesn't need witnesses. It speaks loud enough on its own. She tried again. "They froze the accounts, Mom. Everything's gone. I thought I'd win, but I can't sleep. I keep hearing your voice in my head." My eyes drifted toward the small box on the table. Files, receipts, a sealed envelope from the auditor. I had kept them organized, ready, like a quiet insurance against being erased again. I could have hung up. Instead, I let her keep talking. "I don't know why I'm calling. Maybe to say thank you. Maybe to say I'm sorry." Her breath hitched. "You didn't deserve it." A part of me wanted to answer, to say something, anything, that could end the ache she had started. But forgiveness wasn't the prize she'd lost. It was the thing she'd spent. I closed my eyes and listened. The sound of her regret filled the room like a faint echo of a storm long past. Outside, the sun began to drop. The walls glowed, gold fading into orange. That same glow had once lit the warmth of our family dinners. It used to make her skin shine when she leaned across the table asking for another slice of pie. That was before the signatures, before the trust, before every lie dressed up as help. "I thought money could fix everything," she said quietly. "Now it's just numbers that don't mean anything." That line hit me harder than I expected. Maybe because it was the closest she'd ever come to truth. I said softly, "Some debts don't show up on paper." She didn't answer right away, just a faint breath, and then a small sob. "You're right." For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the phone line, like a wire stretched between two ghosts. Then she said, "Will you ever forgive me?" I could have lied, but lies had built the whole house we were now standing outside of. "No," I said, "but I understand you." The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was hollow, like the air after thunder, heavy but still. She tried once more. "I just wanted to hear your voice." "You have," I said. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand, the cord warm from my fingers. The sun finally dipped below the horizon. The last trace of light settled on the framed photo across the room, our family years ago, smiles that meant something then. The phone buzzed once, a voicemail notification. I pressed play. Her voice again, smaller this time. "I'm sorry." Then a breath, then silence. I didn't delete it. I saved it, sliding it into the same folder as the court papers and audit records. Proof didn't always come in numbers or ink. Sometimes it came in the sound of someone breaking under truth. I leaned back, watching the sky dim into quiet blue. The house was still, steady, mine again. People think closure means peace. It doesn't. It just means you finally stop asking why. I whispered into the fading light, the same words I'd said when this all began. "Didn't I tell you?" Silence feels like justice now. "It feels smaller now," I tell the agent. He smiles politely, pretending to agree, but he doesn't know the difference between space and memory. I step through the doorway, the same one I crossed 100 times before, holding groceries, birthday cakes, or bills that never quite balanced. The house doesn't echo anymore. It sighs. The smell of fresh paint hits me as I walk deeper inside. Clean, synthetic, final. Every wall that once carried voices now carries gloss. I run my fingers along the doorframe where a pencil mark still faintly shows a child's height. Time doesn't erase, it only layers. The agent clears his throat. "You're sure you're ready?" I nod. "Yes." "Everything signed?" He flips through the folder. "The buyer wired the deposit this morning. Closing's in 3 days. You'll get the confirmation by end of week." Money again, tied to something that once held love. I look at the kitchen tiles, each one replaced after she dropped a pan and laughed about it. Even small cracks had history. He hands me the contract, pen balanced across the page. Last signature. I sign without hesitation. The motion feels simple, but it cuts clean. The sale will fund a new trust, one that gives rather than hides. The numbers aren't large, but they're honest. "Where will you go?" he asks gently. "I'm not going anywhere," I say. "Just forward." We walk outside. The front gate swings easier now, the hinges oiled for the showing. I remember the first time I locked it, believing it meant safety. Now it only marks boundaries, kept too long. The agent locks the door behind us, slips the keys onto a ring, and holds it out. "You can hand this over tomorrow." I take it, but one key stays separate in my palm, not for access, just for memory. Some doors you close twice, once in life, once in spirit. A small gust moves through the garden. The scent of paint drifts out, blending with the faint dust of the driveway. I breathe it in. It smells like ending and beginning at once. The agent checks his phone. "They'll start moving things in next week. It's a young couple, expecting a baby soon." "That's good," I reply. "Houses should hear laughter again." He smiles, not quite understanding, and walks to his car. I stay by the fence, staring at the windows. The curtains are gone, leaving them bare and bright. For a moment, I imagine her standing there again, the way she used to watch the street like it owed her something. Then the image fades, replaced by quiet clarity. Inside that house, she plotted, lied, smiled through theft. But outside it, I survived. I locked the gate one final time. The The metal clicks shut, sharp but clean. It doesn't sting, it releases. I whisper, "Let it all stay behind." Then I turn, stepping into the open air. The sun catches the edge of the for sale sign, glinting faintly. The paper contract tucked under my arm rustles in the breeze. The house is gone, but I stayed standing. "Didn't I tell you?" The words leave my mouth before I even realize I've said them. The notary looks up, smiling faintly, unaware that she's witnessing the end of something far larger than paperwork. The table between us smells faintly of polish. A single candle burns near the edge, its small flame dancing in the draft. I watch the ink dry on the page, the letters sealing a future that began in betrayal and ends in choice. The foundation is official now. The trust that once carried her name has been reborn, cleaned of deceit. Every dollar she siphoned now moves toward children with no homes, no family to sign for them. I wanted justice. What I found was renewal. The notary slides the ledger book toward me. Initial here and here. My pen moves steadily, the sound soft and sure. For the first time in years, my hand doesn't tremble when I sign. I say quietly, "This one's for them." She nods, still unaware of the ghosts these lines erase. The candle flickers again, throwing a brief shadow across the paper. It feels symbolic, but I don't chase the thought. I've learned not to overinterpret endings. They arrive in their own time. Outside, the afternoon light filters through the window. The world keeps moving, indifferent, which somehow makes this moment purer. I remember the night I first opened the old trust file. The lies, the forged slips, the missing funds. It had all felt endless. She believed she'd written the final version of my story. But stories are funny things. They can be rewritten line by line if you're stubborn enough to survive the first draft. The notary stamps the final page. The sound echoes like a quiet gavel. "All done," she says. I thank her, gather the papers, and place them inside a folder embossed with the foundation's new name. No family surname, no legacy of shame, just a simple phrase, the Renewal Fund. In the corner of the folder lies a small silver locket. Inside, a photo, the child she once swore wasn't mine. I kept it not as proof of blood, but of endurance. Love, even when betrayed, leaves a permanent signature. I light another candle, replacing the one that's burned low. The flame steadies quickly, as if determined. It reflects in the glossy ink of the new charter. "Stronger this time," I whisper. I think of how far the money will go. Tuition checks, small grants, a safe dorm for someone who's never had one. Every transaction will carry my signature, and every name on the receipt will mean one less life controlled by deceit. A friend from the board walks in to deliver the notarized copies. "Congratulations," she says. "You turned it all around." "Not around," I answer. "Forward." She laughs softly. "Same direction from here." We exchange a brief look, the kind only survivors recognize. When she leaves, I sit back down and open the ledger one last time. Beneath the seal, my name stands alone. No cosigners, no shadows. I let the quiet settle. The only sound is the faint scratch of the candle wick shifting. This is how closure arrives, not with applause, but with order. Not through forgiveness, but through proof. I glance again at the locket, the photograph within slightly faded. That child would be grown by now, maybe even searching for truth too. I hope someday they'll find this story, not to learn my pain, but my correction. People say justice heals. I don't think it does. It clarifies. It wipes the glass clean so you can finally see what you became through all the breaking. I close the ledger and whisper, "Some debts are best repaid in truth." Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story with respect and gratitude.